In a beautiful valley, at the base of the Rocky Mountains, a thriving community emerges along the banks of the Bow River. The town of Cochrane is one of the fastest-growing municipalities in the country. And as always, with rapid growth come big challenges. This is the Robinson Wetland, a prairie pothole left behind on the surface of the earth 10,000 years ago when the last glaciers receded. Located at the intersection of Highway 22 and River Heights Drive, this wetland tells a story of what happens when two worlds collide.
That whole area there at one time was a ranch. It was the old Rattray Ranch, and it's just one of the best ranches in the country. It's just too bad that the owners decided that they didn't want a ranch and they'd rather develop it.
There was only one road south out of town. That was the road that came down River Avenue and then across the old bridge and up. Most of the area was rolly, knobby hills with brush. Quite a few what we used to call sloughs and now we call wetlands.
Wetlands are sometimes hard to see, and sometimes they're seasonal, and sometimes many years go by before that wet area is actually visibly wet. There are various stages of wetland growth that the average individual doesn't know.
Wetlands are the link between a watershed and a body of water. They act like sponges, capturing, collecting, and storing water from rain, melting snow, or ice. They are natural filters, the plants and soils that live there, cleaning pollution and impurities from water heading to our streams, rivers, or oceans.
Well, the Robinson Wetland was probably the first and it was most visible wetland, I think, and as we were seeing development move out of the valley, that's really when we began needing to deal with the wetlands. The development took place in a manner up there that probably wasn't the best route for development to take. We ended up with approving some one-offs with respect to the space. And one-offs are never ever good from planning context. And I remember the debate at council at the time on whether or not we approve one development to go ahead out of the context of the rest of the planning process, which we're still involved in right now. And the council of the day, I lost that argument, and the council of the day said that the one-off development can go forward.
We have this wonderful entrance to Cochrane that down the Highway 22, this wonderful natural asset that our town documents talk so much about preserving, and here we are encouraging car dealerships, and I'm sure we're going to see big box stores and MacDonald's and fast food outlets, and with the intent of making us look like every other town in North America, when we have actually this quite unique and attractive setting. So why aren't we trying to do something a little different that our own statutory documents actually encourage, but in practice we don't follow?
We had a policy in place to govern how the town would deal with the environmental aspects of wetlands and riparian areas, and that policy had been in place for a year before I joined the town staff. But nothing had been done to implement the policy. It called for an inventory of all the wetlands and riparian areas in the town environs, and that hadn't even been started.
In 2006, with policies being ignored, the Robinson Wetland was dangerously close to being filled in, destroyed, forever. Its new neighbor would be a car dealership, and the pond was not part of the plan.
See, what happened is the zoning actually happened first under the one council, mayor and council. So that had been granted. And then a stripping and grading permit was issued. New council comes in, you know, some more emphasis on wetland restoration and saving, and that's when the two worlds collided. Is that this was to be 100% commercial land, and that was the annexation, the zoning, and the strip and grade permit.
I drove by the wetland every day on my way to work and on my way home, And the one day I drove by, I noticed that there were pumps on the south end of the slough, and they were pumping the slough out. The slough was already halfway gone, and they had cut a big hole through the south end of the trees with a backhoe, and that's where they're pumping the water as well. The thing that really ticked me off or drove it home for me was there was a white heron there that had a nest, and she seemed to be pacing back and forth, wondering what was going to happen now that the water was gone. So I guess that's when I decided to make a phone call.
Alberta Environment ordered the work to stop, and so began a lengthy effort to salvage what was left of this important ecosystem. The Cochrane Environmental Action Committee, or CEAC, agreed to take the project on, rallying passionate Cochrane residents, businesses, youth groups, and students. Noxious weeds, which invaded the wetland after the dig, were pulled. Indigenous species, bushes, shrubs, and trees that were removed during stripping and grading on the site were replanted. A giant debris pile and the property line fence were eventually removed. The restoration, truly a team effort that continues even now, with new planting every year. The car dealership became an important partner.
The Cochrane Toyota's commitment to this is to end up with a project that we're all proud of. You know, a living wetland that can be used not only for our customers, for our staff, but for the neighboring schools, and an example of how one of these in an urban commercial environment can be sustainable and healthy.
But it took a lot of time and dedication of volunteers to rescue a natural wonder that many argue should have been protected all along. Valuable lessons have been learned.
Now, while that development's good, and we're glad that the business is being successful and it's up and running, and that's good for Cochrane, I think it's made for a number of really challenging planning decisions, and really challenging with respect to the preservation and protection of that one significant wetland.
Well, the whole process that we saw in this development reminded me very much, and I think reminded others, of how important groups like CEAC, that is the Cochrane Environmental Action Committee, how important they are and how vigilant they have to stay.
The populace of the community has to stand up and tell the elected officials that that's not acceptable.
Cochrane prides itself on being an environmentally friendly community and being different and caring about the West, caring about our natural landscape. Then it has to live up to those values. It has to model those values, and or we're not really different than any other community.
There's only so much water, there's no more being made. And that's why the protection and management of our wetlands is vitally important, because our population is going to grow, no question about that. And so to be able to maintain that, and maintain a quality of water and quantity, I can't emphasize more the importance of managing these wetlands. And these wetlands need to be free of big development.
Because I don't think we understand fully what we're losing by destroying those wetlands. There's a lot of what are called ecosystem services that those wetlands provide for us. They can't necessarily be monetized. We don't know we can't necessarily put a dollar value directly on them, though there's a movement afoot to do that through what's called ecosystem services, valuing these things, these services that wetlands provide, such as flood mitigation, sediment deposition, groundwater discharge and recharge. So by trying to put a value on those services they provide to us, we can understand the trade-offs between destroying that wetland and preserving it. And furthermore, there's also values from those wetlands that we don't currently understand, that we may understand 20, 30 years from now, and wish that we hadn't destroyed those wetlands, but not being able to do anything about that once they're under asphalt.
Well, I think even though you get annexed into town, it would still be nice to have wetlands within town limits. If you go to cities like Calgary and other cities I've been to, there's a lot of communities that's lake this, lake that, lake somewhere else. And I think a lot of those areas, those lakes or wetlands, sort of perform as a meeting place for people, and people fish there and skate there and have wiener roasts there, and I think it fosters a sense of community.
You know, developers will try to incorporate man-made water features into their developments to give it that natural aspect, and so it simply doesn't make sense in some cases to destroy natural features to rebuild new ones which aren't as effective in the services they provide than what the natural features were to begin with.
The efforts surrounding the Robinson Wetland have in many ways paid off. Early in 2013, 7 years after the Robinson Wetland story began, the town of Cochrane announced plans to develop a new wetland policy. CEAC is working with planners and others to support the new policy that will strike a delicate balance between the need to protect wetlands and the need to develop lands for homes and commercial use.
I think we could have done better with that wetland if we hadn't approved the one-off development and we had have been able to take our time and more holistically plan the entire area.
Hindsight is a marvelous thing, and you know, again, alluding to our fast-growing community, you know, it would be nice for everybody to know what everybody else knows, but that life happens, and you don't know. You know that there's a desire to save these pieces within a commercial area. If I would have known this initiative earlier, would have been much easier. But again, it's bringing all the parties together and finding out the wishes and the wants. And we can't go backwards, but we can certainly go forwards. And so going forward, we'll do what we're going to do, and that's build something that every one of us at the end of the day are very proud of.
And people have always taken it for granted that it's there, it's free, and so it's the combination of the land, the water, and which is also all the forms of wetlands, lakes, rivers, you know, and of course ultimately the air that we breathe is the natural capital.
Decisions which will impact the landscape for, you know, millennia, but you know, so why not wait? Why not take our time and try to do this right?
It's important for me to have healthy wetland to exist in our community. I don't want to have to load up my grandchild and drive her for 100 miles to show her what a wetland is like. I want her to be able to experience the same opportunities I had and when I grew up in the area.
The story of Robinson Wetland has been a great teacher. It may have been saved, but as the boundaries of this town and others swell into the surrounding country, hundreds of other wetlands are in danger, and if they disappear, so do the birds, animals, and insects that live there. It's hoped this little prairie pond will serve as a reminder of the importance of planning, protecting, and preserving for the generations to come.
Down on the watershed, so many idle hands and well wishes. How will the water from the depths, from the ditches? How will the water from the depths, from the ditches?
Seems so familiar then. I was hoping you could tell me why or when. I was hoping you could tell me when, child. I was hoping you could tell me when, child. I was at the end of the line. I was rolling nickels and dimes. I was at the end of the line. I was rolling nickels and dimes. I thought I'd go into town, I thought I'd get myself some looking glasses. And I was thinking, I was hoping maybe we could get past this.